Hello, hello. We're back again for another Other Ink Thursday. I'm Matthew Orr of Wet Ink Games, and I am joined once again by my good friend Tristan Zimmerman of the Molten Sulfur blog and the Molten Sulfur Press. Tristan, welcome.
Matt, it is as always a delight to be here. Thank you so much for having me on again.
Of course, of course. You're probably my most frequent guest, but that's kind of the that's a feature, not a bug, right? It's like you're pushing out new content, and I like to talk to you, so it makes sense for us to keep doing this. Um, what's the topics for today?
Today we're going to be talking about some really interesting tea trouble at a late Ming Chinese shrine. And then we're going to be talking about a really interesting and kind of unique and special escape from a wildfire in 1918 northern Minnesota.
Sounds great. Let's get into it. What do you I've read the blog posts, and so as I said to you before we started recording, I'm at least as informed as the average reader.
Yeah, as usual, I'm here to talk about, cool things from real history
Yes, yes.
that, you can file the serial numbers off of and drop into your ongoing RPG campaign. And the one that we're going to start with starts in 1614 in China in the town of Shaoxing, which is kind of just south of Shanghai. And starts in 1614, runs to kind of 1620, 1630, which is a really interesting moment in Chinese history because it's kind of, though people didn't know it at the time, it was kind of the last days of the Ming Dynasty, and that kind of colors a lot of what's going on. But in Shaoxing, there was this shrine called the Speckled Bamboo Shrine, and well, I guess first we have to talk about the scholar gentleman called Zhang Dai. And okay, so what is a scholar gentleman? There was this centuries, millennia question mark long Chinese practice of selecting government officials and hiring government officials by the means of standardized tests, the examination process, where people there'd be a nationwide exam, and it's an essay based exam, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people report to testing centers, and they are told, okay, here's the first exam question. Write an essay about X. And the essays were mostly about, like, please write an essay about this particular topic in classical Chinese literature. And everybody would sit in these little, like, one person shacks at the testing center, and all at the same time they would write their essays, and there'd be a series of essay questions, and then at the end all the essays are gathered up, and you have a suite of essay readers who read the essays and say, like, oh, this is a pretty good essay. This guy's got a good head on his shoulders. He passes the exam. And in order to be appointed to a government office, you needed to have passed an exam at a particular level. So, once you pass the first round of exams, a few years later, maybe you show up for the next round, the next higher round of exams, and you kind of can work your way up the ladder. And so you get this government position, and you make some money in government work, and you're sent around to different places in the empire to do various jobs. There's this interesting system of, like, rotating office. You're not allowed to go to the place where you're from for fear that you would be corrupt. You would know too many
Right.
people there. You would, favor your relatives and your friends. So you're sent to places you've never been before. You work there for a few years, and then you're rotated out to a new place. Um, and um, and you're making money at this. And what do you do with that money? Well, you buy land. And then you have income from rents on that land. And because now your family now has land, and thus your family now has a reliable income stream, you are able to take your sons And your sons then can study the classics and become scholars. And maybe your sons take the exam. And if they pass the exam and if they pass us, climb up the ranks, then they can become government officials. And so you have kind of this hereditary class of what are called scholar gentlemen. And not all scholar gentlemen are government officials. Once your family has an established like place, after a generation or two, you start seeing sons who are going to school and they're learning the classics and they're becoming very educated. And then they're not going to government service. They're focusing on scholarship for its own sake. And scholar gentlemen are strongly associated with kind of aesthetic and cultural sensibilities. And that is where we encounter Zhang Dai. He comes from a scholar gentleman family. He is a scholar gentleman. He has siblings and uncles who have risen quite high in the imperial bureaucracy, but he himself is not a government official. He is very well educated, but he's not a government official. He has relatively little interest in becoming a government official. He is interested in these cultural and aesthetic things, right? He runs a poetry club. He's very into tea. He's very into painting. He's very into throwing highly refined parties out on his boat on the lake, and that's who he is as a person, which winds up really biting him in the ass when the Ming Dynasty falls, and
Spoilers.
things. But that's a conversation for another time. So
Well,
Zhang Dai. So go ahead.
I was just gonna butt in and have sort of a joke about like it's not different now. Like I mean, there are definitely like architectural firms and like non-arts based nonprofits and stuff like that, where like people with like master's degrees are like answering the phones because they're like part of this like aesthetic appreciation society, essentially.
Oh yeah.
That like there's sort of like a prestige with like, yes, I did pass the exams, but like I'm here doing like I'm not doing like that what I studied for, right? I'm here making this organization go. I don't know. It's not the underemployment sort of thing, I guess, is sort of a negative aspect of it, but like there are people who get education, and I'm linking it to other things where like the prestige of having passed the test then gets, like how many times have you seen like something about like, oh, this business it's like a vitamin supplement selling business, but like there's like the founder of the company has a PhD, like it's like, so it's a mark of like, it's supposed to be a mark of legitimacy, right? That you
Mhm.
got that level of education no matter what you're doing, even if it's like selling, vitamin pills or whatever.
Yeah, and of course, there's no shortage of rich families here in the United States where it's just kind of understood that, of course, you will attain at a minimum a bachelor's degree, even though it's also understood that, like, yeah, you are going to be devoting your life to some sort of artistic pursuit. Um, Certainly not all rich families, but that is a thing for many families.
Right.
So yeah, this is hardly a unique thing. It's a very, in Chinese history, it's a very distinctive thing where like scholar gentlemen are just sort of a consistent feature of Chinese upper class society, century after century after
And
century.
how long, and before we go on to the next, let me ask, like, how long has the Ming Dynasty exist? You've hinted that this is at the end of the Ming Dynasty, but
Mhm.
like, what was that period? I have this sense that it's about 400 years of Chinese history is the Ming Dynasty. Is that, do
Oh
you have
geez.
that? Do you have that to the top of your brain? Um,
Quickly, because I don't want to give you
well,
the wrong answer here on the air.
I
Yeah,
ask like
so
because it's the
300 years.
300 years. Okay,
Yeah.
but like any sort of stable, relatively stable society tends to get more complex as it goes on. So like if this is at the end of the Ming Dynasty and they've had hundreds of years to build up to this level of complexity that like that kind of I think informs and contributes to what
Yeah.
you're going to talk about next, that there's
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
yeah. So
So Zhang Dai visits this shrine, the speckled bamboo shrine, in Shaoxing. And he happens to, it's not why he's there, but he happens to drink from a spring at the shrine. And he says, "Oh wow, this water tastes very strong. There's a lot of phosphorus in this water. It's very strong flavor. Um, I wonder what would happen if you made tea with this water." So he makes tea with the water because this is just kind of who he is as a person, and says, "Oh, I really dig this. This is really good. This works. Let me do some experimentation." And so he gets his uncle, who's also, has a strong aesthetic sense. He gets his uncle to work with him on this. And they do experiment after experiment after experiment to determine, what is the best way to make tea with this water. Um, and um, they wind up coming up with this method where, like, okay, you take the water from the spring and then you let it sit out for 3 days so that all the gases in it can effervesce out, and then you take that water and you boil it in the finest white porcelain, and you add exactly this, green tea leaves from exactly this cultivar of tea, and you add 2 petals from a jasmine flowers, and it delivers. This is the absolute best way to make this tea, and Zhang Dai, he names it Snow Orchid tea because it's got to have a classy name.
Yeah, yeah.
And he goes into business, selling Snow Orchid tea, right? Like, the process of making Snow Orchid tea becomes this very closely held secret. And he runs a tea society. So Snow Orchid tea becomes very popular in the upper class circles around Shaoxing. And it within 5 years, like, it becomes the tea that if you are a tea snob, you are drinking Snow Orchid tea. And Zhang Dai, he starts incorporating it into other things. So he, like, oh, we can use the tea in making cheese, and so you can have Snow Orchid cheese now, and Snow Orchid wine, and Snow Orchid fermented soybean snacks, and candies, and vinegar, and rolls, and fritters, and it becomes this. By 1620, the Snow Orchid brand is like this really big thing in and around Shaoxing. And
I love that history has like nothing new in it. Like this is just like I mean, this happens now with like, avocado oil and avocado toast and avocado, like, face masks and all that kind of stuff. It's like, ooh, it's got to have avocado in it. Or quinoa had its rise. I mean, I don't know
Mhm.
if it's had its fall yet, but it's like everything. Ooh, this new nutrition bar has quinoa in it, because like nobody's heard of that until somebody started putting it out there, and now it's like these. It's the same sort of phenomenon of like these. Everything's gotta. Once it gets noticed, then like this is the new thing that's amazing, and everybody puts it in everything. Acai
Mhm.
berries had their
Yeah,
day,
yeah, yeah.
uh, you know. So anyway,
So so he's just like, he's doing his Snow Orchid thing. And
yeah.
then what happens? Well, it's exactly like you said with modern fads. It becomes oversaturated, and the Snow Orchid phenomenon kind of escapes the rarefied upper reaches of society, and like the middling classes start enjoying Snow Orchid stuff. And they can't afford or aren't interested in like official brand name Snow Orchid things, but everyone knows that, like, yeah, fundamentally Snow Orchid tea is just like tea made with the green tea made with the water at this spring, at the speckled bamboo shrine. And so, okay, fine, it's not made with like the process that Zhang Dai is like, this is the way to do it. Like, no,
Right.
man, we just made tea with the
Right.
water.
It's
And so
it's
now,
it's just it's champagne, except it's not from the
yeah,
Champagne
exactly,
region
exactly.
of
It's
France.
champagne. And so now all of a sudden there's all these like tea houses and wine sinks that spring up around the shrine so that they have easy access to the water. And you've got tourists coming in to um because Snow Orchid is such a thing that you have tourists visiting to drink the wine, the Snow Orchid wine, at all these wine sinks. And like, sure, it's not brand name Snow Orchid wine, but what does anybody care? And I mean, Zhang Dai cares a lot because it's
Sure,
his
sure.
perfect thing has been sullied by association with the middling classes. Um, and it
It's
becomes such a thing that it becomes a problem for the speckled bamboo shrine. And again, nothing new to us. This is the
Hmm.
Instagram problem, right? Like, oh, this place blows up on Instagram, suddenly everybody's visiting it and the place is ruined. It's no longer, oh, the special place for locals. Now it's just totally overrun with
Yeah.
tourists. It's not fun anymore. And the monks at the shrine are just like, look, we've got monk business to do, right? Like
Right, right.
we we are not operating an artesian well. Like we've got things going on, and you people are just you're making it very difficult for us to get our monk on because just there's people everywhere all over, and this is a problem. And then they get and so they wind up suffering this series of problems. So first they have the Instagram problem, and then I mentioned these officials. A corrupt government official who's been appointed to the Shaoxing area steps in and is just like, this spring, the spring is my spring now.
Yeah.
And he just calls dibs on it. It's not clear to me whether he like walls it off, so he physically blocks people from accessing it, but like he definitely restricts access to it to kind of just him and his inner circle of friends. Um, and I was not able to determine whether he became a middleman and was like selling the water to make money, or whether it was more a social thing where like, if you want to have the Snow Orchid tea, like you have to come to my parties at my house, and therefore I'm the socially popular guy because only I have champagne.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
but that lasts for a while. It's not clear to me whether the monks ultimately find a way to drive him off, or I think perhaps more likely he just gets reassigned eventually, right? And he's sent somewhere else. And so, okay, now everybody can go back to the spring. Um, and Unfortunately, this stunt that the official pulls just makes Snow Orchid tea even more popular, right? It's the tea so good that somebody did a corruption over it. And so there's
It's
even more tourists. And
it's
these
it's
tourists,
it's like Vanta Black. Only the one guy can sell
yeah.
it.
And the tourists are coming from farther and farther and farther away. And that in and of itself poses problems for the monks because people are showing up and they're from far away. So they're demanding hospitality from the shrine, from the monks. Saying, look, I traveled a long way. We have a reasonable cultural expectation that if I came to your shrine from far away, you are going to provide me with food and firewood.
Mhm.
And the monks are just like, look, man, that's fine when it's just onesie twosies, but like we do not have enough food and firewood for everybody here. And some travelers are getting really upset about this, and kind of understandably. They did not realize when they set out from home that cultural norms would not be respected when they arrived here. And so there's brawls, like people are brawling with the monks. Um, and
It's it's so far from what it should be.
Yeah, this
Like
is not how it's
this,
supposed to be.
the monk business is not doing well. They can't get into their monk stuff when they got to fight people for, their their rations.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the monks finally have enough of this, and they say, "This is absurd. We need to stop this whole thing." So they take a bunch of manure and they dump it in the spring. Like, cool. You want to drink orchid tea? Like you are going to be drinking sewage. Um, and Jiang Dai, remember Jiang Dai?
Yeah,
Jiang
yeah.
Dai is so horrified by this that he sends his servants in to clean up the shrine. And the monks very politely wait for the servants to leave, and they wait for Jiang Dai to, take the water that he's insisting upon. And then they just throw more manure into the spring. And they do this 3 times before Jiang Dai finally gives up and says, okay, there's just going to be manure. Like, Snow Orchid tea is not going to be a thing anymore. Um, this is why we can't have nice
This is
things.
why we can't have nice things.
Um, but while that does go a long way to quashing interest, and like certainly the monks don't have the tourism problem anymore, because nobody's going to travel from far away to drink sewage. Um, it doesn't. It doesn't. Snow Orchid tea doesn't entirely go away. Some of the tea shops, some of the wine sinks around the shrine still persist. Of course, in the process of making tea, you're boiling the water. So, some people are willing to take their chances in the process of making wine, like you are mixing the water with alcohol. Some people are willing to take their chances. And so it still winds up being a thing, just a smaller thing. And so this,
Which
like,
Also, is it puts it back in the rarefied thing, right? It's like, it's rarer now, but it's still exclusive, or is it just like
My
uncommon?
understanding is that the upper classes are no longer drinking Snow Orchid tea. They're not willing to drink anything that's had manure in it. So it's just the people from, and of course, middle class is just a wildly inappropriate thing to say, but whatever. People from the people who can afford to do this sort of thing. I guess the Chinese term would be rich peasants.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not 100% there. Um, are those are I believe the people who are still to a certain extent frequenting the wine sinks and the tea shops. Um, but yeah, so
It's
this like
there's so much in even our culture. I mean, this is sort of sidetracking from your discussion, but there's so much in our culture that's that way. Where I can think about the shrimp cocktail or whatever. Like you get the shrimps on the like glass with
mhm.
the shrimp sauce or whatever, and it's like it's like such an image for the mid-tier of luxury that you can put
Mhm.
a shrimp on a thing, but also shrimp are like widely available and farmed. They're not actually exclusive. I mean, steak is the same way. Like there's the reason why steak has like a prestige is because it used to be rare, and but now everybody can get it if you want it. So it's like I don't know. There's these things that like persist as sort of like echoes of exclusivity, but aren't actually that way anymore. It's
There's well, and my favorite example of that, of course, is lawns, right? Lawns used to,
mm,
the fact that you could have large amounts of green land not devoted to agriculture
yeah, yeah, yeah,
was in England an enormous status symbol, right?
yeah,
Like, look
yeah.
at me, I have land that I can just lose money on, and it's no big deal. And now, as a consequence of that, everybody who has a house in the United States has to devote labor to maintaining a lawn. But there's also I think relevant to this.
What are
There's
we
this
doing? What are we doing?
look,
Anyway,
man. I am slowly trying to convert my lawn away from being a lawn. And having some success. I am fortunate to live in a neighborhood where we've got lots of folks who are just like, "Yep, this is my prairie lawn."
right, right.
All
Yeah.
native plants, and
hmm
thank God for that.
right. Anyway, back to Shanghai and his problem here.
Yeah, so just there's also this interesting thing that we get to experience today, where there's almost a zebra stripe thing for many luxuries down this up
Mm,
and down the social ladder, where um, people, status concerned people, are always trying to look like they belong to a higher rung than
hmm
they actually belong to, and are trying to not look like they belong to the rung below them. Um, and so you wind up with this interesting thing sometimes where um, where something like, for example, clothing, right? Jeans and a t-shirt or a hoodie um, is a thing that is present at certain levels of social status, but not present in the interceding or in the interstitial ones.
hmm
For example, your tech bros and a lot of the ultra wealthy will wear jeans and a t-shirt as opposed to some bespoke thing, um, which sets them apart from a different level or a different
Well,
group of very wealthy people who are
like the
wearing their Hermes and
yeah,
whatnot.
like I can totally say it. Like the owners of these tech companies are like dressed down casual because they don't have anything to prove because they own the big tech company. But like all the managers that are like running the accountant side of stuff are probably in suits. I
Mhm.
mean,
And yet
yeah,
the programmers are back in jeans and a
yeah,
t-shirt.
because they don't have any. They also have nothing to prove because they
Mhm.
aren't at the level where they're running the business.
So
I
anyway,
yeah,
and that is a gross oversimplification. It is
yeah,
not
yeah. Of
present in
course,
all
of course.
things, blah blah blah. It's just an occasional interesting, and I do think that there's echoes of that in the speckled bamboo shrine
Yeah,
business,
yeah.
where like, oh no, once the middling classes become interested in it, like all of a sudden Jiang Dai is not going to push as hard to retain it. blah blah blah. He does give up after 3 attempts
Yeah.
to demanure the spring. But from a role playing game perspective, you have this interesting thing. So something uh, a lot of role playing game campaigns are in the oh god, I can't believe I'm blanking on the word. This is so embarrassing. Um, oh
Like
no,
you're not talking
the
about like murder hobos or like
no the
wandering.
style of novel where
Oh,
people are traveling around and it's just kind of a sequence of largely
picaresque.
disconnected events. Sorry?
I think it's picaresque.
Picaresque, thank you. Oh, that was embarrassing. A lot of RPG campaigns are in the picaresque mode,
Right.
where
Right.
like
You go to White Sparrow and you do an adventure and then like, okay, we did 3 adventures there, but now we're gonna go to this other supplement book that takes us over to the Sword Coast and now we're,
exactly.
like something else happens there,
But also you have a lot of campaigns, and I've had a lot of fun with. And don't get me wrong, picaresque is amazing. There's a reason why it's so common. But I've had you also have a lot of campaigns, and I've had a lot of fun with this style where you're kind of centering around a single location. Um, this is home base. All the adventures are going to circle around home base. So home base could be a starship, right? The home base itself could move around, or home base could be a village or whatever. But in the this all the adventures center around home base mode, it can be really valuable to give a sense of consistency to home base. But of course, everything in RPGs has to give the players something to do, right? If you're just the GM is narrating at the players are not engaged, they're not involved. They
hmm
have to be making choices, they have to be doing things. And so, how do you maintain a sense of consistency that isn't just like you narrate at the players like, oh, you go to Swallow Hill and Swallow Hill is exactly the same as it was the last time you go there. Like, no, you need to give the players something to do, but you can't be undoing their work, right? Because then that's not fun, that's not interesting. And the Speckled Bamboo
Right.
Shrine is really cool because if you are just take take the Speckled Bamboo Shrine and the Snow Orchid tea, file the serial numbers off of it, drop it into your location. Every time the players go back to home base, there is a new problem at the shrine. And the problems are related, but they all stem from the same central issue that there's no real way to resolve, which is that people want to make tea and wine and whatnot from the spring at the shrine, and it's problems in succession. And each of these problems is relatively brief, right? You have the problem with like, hey, rowdy drunks are making it hard for the monks to do monk business. Like the players can that is an hour of play right there, right? The players break up some fights. Shoo, 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 the monks say, "Oh, thank you, players. You're so cool." And then you go off on your next adventure, and when you come back, hey, there's this corrupt official who has taken over the shrine, and he's walled off the spring, and now there's a part of the shrine that the monks themselves cannot like get into on their own shrine, and they're just like, "Look, can you talk to this guy? Can you do something about this?" Like. Again, that's an hour of play, but it's something new. It's something for the players to do, and it gives the sense of continuity
Right.
to the place. It helps make the players feel invested in the place because they are involved in the maintenance of this village that contains this shrine.
Yeah.
And also, every time you do something like that, um, you are introducing new NPCs that can be used in subsequent adventures. So, somebody like Jang Dai or somebody like the corrupt official, you have introduced this concept. The players have probably even met this person and spoken to them briefly. And now, in a later adventure, when you need a government official, or you need a poet, or you need a wizard or something, instead of just being like, it's roll on the random name table, Susan Smith, the wizard, you'd be like, oh, you remember that corrupt official? The wizard is the
Right.
corrupt official.
It's
And now
that Susan Smith from
exactly. It's
that
that
encounter
Susan Smith, the
previously.
one you've already spoken to, and therefore the one that you already have an established relationship with. And maybe the relationship is positive and maybe it's negative. In my opinion, what matters is that the players, not just the characters, but that the players already feel some sort of emotion
hmm
about Susan Smith. And maybe it's not a particularly strong emotion, but as long as it exists, as long as there is that sense of recognition, like, oh yeah, Susan Smith, we do feel some kind of way about her. That is a much stronger foundation to build your adventure upon than here's a totally new NPC and we have to establish why you care
Right.
about
It's
this
the
NPC for good or ill. Like, nope, we already get to start with that level of concern, and all the while you're building the sense of continuity, you're building the sense of place, you're giving the players connection to this place that the adventure is coming out of. And for me, that's really strong. That's really good
yeah.
RPG stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really the insight, uh, you know, because your blogs are always like, 75% the history, and then at the end you're like, and here's the RPG stuff, and like
Hmm.
that way to take it where like you are bringing in, like you've just been saying, the consistency of the place where you're from is changing. It's ever changing. Like if you go away and you come back, it's different, and like new things have happened, and there's new problems, and like your connection to place is not constantly challenged, but constantly reinforced, I guess, by
Yeah.
like meeting up with the next iteration of the problem of like the
Hmm.
people that you care about. And, it doesn't have to be
It's forever
this.
changing, but these all of these changed states are recognizably all connected to the same core concept.
Right. And when you find a story like, I mean, because I know of like the Kobold owned sandwich shop storyline that developed over the course of time, or you have a minor league, whatever. There's a minor league team, right? That
Oh,
you're
I
always
love
like checking
that.
in with like what the newest game is and what their newest challenge is or whatever. But like to have a given, like as you say, this is your whole thing. It's like here's a given story that's already existing that like sets it all up where there is a reoccurring problem that is based on the water. Like in it's yeah, just take that and put it in where you need it to be. It's great.
Yeah. And of course, you can develop the water any way you like, right? After five adventures, you can discover, like, oh, the reason there's so much phosphorus in it is because the big bad is sealed away under, the village, and he's the one leaching phosphorus from his bindings or whatever. Like, you have lots of once you have established facts about something, the world is your oyster, right?
Hmm.
And you can just tie those facts together kind of however you please, as long as
Well,
you're in something reasonably fantastical.
and I think it takes like the one of the actual plays that I've listened to. That's where the Kobold owned sandwich shop came from. Like it started as just a cast off character, like oh this Kobold guy, and then like they charm the Kobold and tell him to leave and like you should go leave and start a sandwich shop, and he's like oh yeah yeah yeah, and then like but then the players wanted to check in on him later,
Hmm.
so it's like then the GM is invited to like make the joke reality, and like the whole table is committing to the bit in that respect, and like every monster that they convert to not attack them ends up working at the sandwich shop, because then it's like they've got a whole collection of like bugbears and kobolds working at the sandwich shop, because these are all people that they've chosen not to kill in various dungeons that they've been to or whatever. But like it could be whatever, but it's whatever
Hmm.
the table cares about and commits to is the point that I'm making. It
Yeah.
can be anything as long as it's interesting to the players and the GM.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer that the campaign is about whatever the players want it to be about, right?
Mm,
And so whenever I'm running something and I've got this NPC or this concept or this place that I've introduced, and oftentimes it's something that I had to improvise, right? The players went left when I expected them to go right, and so like, there's this dwarf. His name is Garrick, and then the players are just like, the players have this interaction, then they very clearly like this dwarf. Like, he is cool. They are invested in his outcome. Like, yeah, guess what? Garrick's coming back, right? Garrick's
right.
coming back in the next adventure. I'm gonna find a way to shoehorn Garrick into the next adventure. And meanwhile, I've got this wizard over here that I thought the players were really gonna glom onto. He's got a cool visual aesthetic. He's got a cool voice, and the players just not interested. Like,
Yeah.
cool, guess what? That wizard never coming back. I don't care how much work I put into this wizard. Players weren't into him. He's not coming back.
Right. Right.
Garrick, though, Garrick's definitely coming back. So yeah, whatever the players are into, like, yeah, shift your campaign to make it about the things that your players are into, and everybody will just have more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. All right. We probably talked more than half an hour about that, but let's keep going. What's the second story from your blog?
Yeah, so the second one I'm here to talk about is the Forest Fire Boxcar Escape. So
Which
this
is
one,
it's a great title. It's just I'm sold. Tell me more.
this is in 1918, in and around Cloquet and Moose Lake, Minnesota. These back in 1918 were logging towns, and still are fairly near to Duluth, for folks who know Duluth. And 1918, of course, World War I is on. This is also the year of the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu has not arrived in Minnesota yet, but it will right after this forest fire, which is really bad. And these logging towns, so northern Minnesota during this period is logging country. Minnesota is supplying vast quantities of lumber from the North Woods to the United States. And the issue with that is that logging promotes forest fires, um, which sounds a little counterproductive. Like there's fewer trees, question mark. But the
Well,
deal is, um, a
trees don't
general
catch on fire like debris catches on fire.
exactly. So generally speaking, um, when you cut down a tree, what you're really interested in from a lumber perspective is the trunk. So the branches commonly get lopped off in the process and left behind. And every time you drop a tree, as long as you're in, a decently dense forest, it's bringing down other things as it falls, right? It's tearing off other branches from other trees. It's toppling smaller trees. And so, cool, you've logged this area, you've hauled out all the sellable timber, and now you have left behind a field of whatever smaller trees managed to survive the process, and what's called slash, which is just branches and bark and small fallen trees and logs and just all kinds of things coating the forest floor. And the slash dries out, and becomes just tinder, right? Now, this is not, it's not like people in 19 didn't know this, right? So there were lots of regulations in place. The logging companies were required to do controlled burns to burn away the slash. But even with this, smaller scale wildfires were just kind of omnipresent in northern Minnesota during this period. Um, and um, this was complicated by the fact that in 1918, so first off, 1918, the driest summer in 50 years in northern Minnesota. And and there were serious labor shortages because all these young men of working age were off in Europe fighting in the war. And um, so a lot of the regulations aren't getting done. You can't be doing controlled burns because it's too dry. There's too high a risk that your controlled burn will become an uncontrolled burn. Um, One of the big sources of wildfires during this period is from locomotives, steam locomotives, burning coal in their fireboxes, and then you've got those smokestacks and billowing smoke coming out of the smokestacks. Well, guess what? The billowing smoke will carry embers, will carry coal embers up with it. And well, yes, according to regulations, the smokestacks are supposed to have screens on top of them to keep the burning embers from flying out. But in practice, in the high heat produced by these fireboxes, the screens will very often warp, and this became a hassle for the engineers who had to deal with it. So a lot of the engineers on these trains are just like, the screen fell off. I'll get around to replacing it at some point. And so, these regulations were not being followed. The railroad companies were required to send people to walk the rail lines, to patrol the rail lines constantly, so that they could spot fires as they got started and then extinguish them. But labor shortage, this was not happening. And you had all these lumber yards full with boards, right? Boards and timber all stacked up. So this,
Some of those historical photos of how big those lumber yards are
yeah,
just truly incredible.
yeah. And of course, all of this lumber is being carried to to meet America's demand via rail. So all these giant stacks of firewood um, is right next to where the trains are, and the trains are spitting out fire. So yeah, surprise, surprise, there's lots of fires. And in early October 1918, in the midst of this great, heat and drought, the humidity in the air just abruptly out of nowhere plummets, and that's it. That's enough. And on I want to say October 10th, it is observed that there is a grass fire beside one of these lumber yards outside. I want to say Moose Lake, and people spend like a full day trying to extinguish this blaze, and it does not work. And it's spreading, and it's spreading, and it's spreading. And meanwhile, there's other smaller fires that are now starting to join the big blaze, and the word goes out: this is not controllable. This whole region is going to burn. Everybody get out. And the way to get out is via train. And so that it creates this wonderful symmetry that I just love, where the trains start the fires, but the trains are also the way to escape the fires. Because this is a train-centric culture. All these people, when they need to do their shopping, they're not their big shopping trips. They're not doing them in Cloquet and Moose Lake. They're doing them in Duluth. They're getting on the train and riding the train in to do their big weekly shopping or whatever. And so at the word goes out: get to Cloquet, get to Moose Lake, and there are trains waiting to take you to safety. And so everybody, as the world is turning to flame, everybody is rushing to these railroad stations, and thousands of people wind up escaping via train. 450 people die in these fires. Like, this is hugely deadly. Um, and the stories around, like, the individual human stories around this escape, are incredibly gameable. So I guess first off, hi, content warning. Some of these stories are grisly, and they involve, burning to death and other terrible ways to go. So be advised.
Yeah.
Um,
Good call out.
uh,
And
so
I mean, while people decide whether or not they want to continue, I mean, this is like, you don't have to like imagine what this looked like, because we've recently in the
mhm.
last few years seen like incredibly complete media coverage of like what a very large forest fire looks like, and what kind of impact that has on the sight lines and the horizon, and like in urban areas, and like all
Mhm.
of it. It's like, it's not even like, I think sometimes when we talk about history and, thousands of people on horses or whatever, like, you kind of have to picture it. But like, no, this is like ripped from the headlines in some respects. The
Yeah.
visuals are handy to the in 2025. So
Yeah, all that business that you have seen in the modern photographs absolutely lines up with eyewitness accounts from the Cloquet Moose Lake fire. Sky turns orange. Just everything is orange now,
mhm.
until the fire gets close enough, and then the sky is black, and just everything is black because the smoke has blotted out all light sources. Everything is black except the leaping flames. Um, and so most people who get out on foot. But you have folks who the biggest reason why you wouldn't get out on foot, why you would try for another way, is if your family has more small children than can make the trip on foot, right? You've got too many babes in arms to be able to bring the whole family out on foot. So what do? You For some folks, you get in your wagon, and you let your horse pull you to the train station. For more folks, you get in your car, your Model T. Essentially, you get in your Model T and drive to the station. Um, and the Model Ts in particular, the folks getting out via car, have just absolutely horrific stories, because, of course, these cars are. We have learned a lot about how to make cars that handle well. And these cars are not that. So what you wind up with is just story after story after story after story of: we're driving our car, we're driving as fast as we think we can drive safely, and we wind up in the ditch. And people are getting thrown out of their cars. People are dying in horrific car accidents. Um, Case after case of like, yeah, our car wound up in the ditch, so we started walking, and then our neighbors stopped in his car, and we got in his car, and we went a quarter mile, and then his car wound up in the ditch, and that's how my wife died.
Hmm.
Stuff like that. Um, Standard horrific car accident stuff. The worst was absolutely a place that ever since then, outside, I want to say Moose Lake, now called Dead Man's Curve, appropriately enough. Dead Man's Curve was a blind curve. It was the sort of curve where, in ordinary conditions, you see it coming up. Okay, now it's time for us to slow down, take this 90-degree curve that, it's very sharp, but, we can do it in our Model T, no big deal. Well, when the sight lines are shot, because the world has turned to smoke, you can't see Dead Man's Curve coming up. And estimates of and so car after car after car is just going straight through, right? Just not making the turn. You try to make the turn at the last minute, now your Model T flips over. Imagine doing a rollover in a Model T. Estimates are that somewhere between 75 and 100 people died at Dead Man's Curve. I mean, we're talking almost a quarter of the people who died in the Cloquet Moose Lake fire died at this one turn. um
That's it's horrific and fascinating.
yeah.
To that can be known so specifically like that.
Yeah.
It's
The folks who came in via wagon um, were you had embers landing in the wagon, and just all of a sudden the wagon is on fire. And people in cars had the same problem. Like, there were lots of things in these old cars that were flammable, so embers are landing in the wagon in the car. Just all of a sudden the wagon is on fire. Hope you make it out in time. Lots of people didn't. Lots of people burned to death inside their own wagons, clutching their babies, because kind of definitionally anybody in a wagon is holding a baby, because that's why you're not walking. Um, and people there's eyewitness reports of like, oh yeah, and as we're going, we're having to put out fires in the mane of the horse as embers land. Wildfires make their own wind. And there's hurricane force winds going through here. So you've got loads and loads of eyewitness reports of lumber yards on fire, where the flaming boards, are just getting picked up one by one and flying through the air, and then coming down on somebody's house or haystack, or in their wagon, or in their car, or right on top of them. And that's a bad way to go.
uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Not
Uh,
great, not great.
a lot of folks who felt that they were not going to be able to make it to the train station. A lot of folks tried to find shelter in root cellars and in wells, with mixed results. Some families that hid in a well or in a root cellar did manage to make it through okay. A lot didn't. So you had plenty of cases where these places turned into ovens, right? Where the world is on fire on top of the root cellar, and so the temperature in the root cellar just increases and increases and increases until everyone inside cooks. And so, there's reports of like, yeah, and then we entered the Johnson's root cellar, and we found the entire Johnson family. And their clothes had been burned off their bodies, and but the metal buttons were seared into their flesh in a line down their chest. Um, and then you had other cases where the temperature didn't get so hot inside the root cellar, but instead, all the oxygen got used up, right? The fire just sucked out all the oxygen. And so the entire families just asphyxiated in their root cellars with not a mark on their bodies. In wells, again, some folks got through okay, but there were plenty of instances where people would either bake or suffocate while hiding in a well. There's one case where 5 people tried to hide. People, unsurprisingly, had better luck in dry wells than in wells that had water in them. There's one case where 5 people climbed into a well that had water in it, where one guy was standing on the bucket, and then 4 people standing on successive shoulders in the well, and then the ropes that was holding the bucket snapped, and all 5 people fell right into the water and drowned. Um, and so you have all this terrible, terrible stuff going on. Um, and so move Move now to the train station for the folks who make it out.
Oh, right.
Um,
Right. And if you survive all that, then you get to the train station.
then you get to the train station, and trains are rolling out, and it's lines and lines and lines of boxcars that had been brought. Ordinarily these would be carrying lumber, but just shoving people into the boxcars, and then the train gets rolling. From Cloquet alone, 7,000 people made it out in trains. But the last train out of Cloquet in particular was really has become an odd bit of controversy. So there is what was his name? Lawrence Fowley was the name of the railway agent in Cloquet. And it's 10:30 p.m. This is the last train out of Cloquet. It is full. The fire is not just around the town, the fire is in the town. The town of Cloquet is actively burning to the ground while the last train is waiting for the order to depart. And so there's this popular bit of like local folk memory of Lawrence Fowley declaring, "Okay, the train is full, roll on out," and him hopping up onto the cowcatcher on the front of the locomotive to hold up a lantern to like shine the way through the smoke for the locomotive. And it seems like that did happen, but there is, and so Lawrence Fowley is kind of remembered as a hero. There's a park in Cloquet named after him. But 50 years after the fire, a woman who was a teenager at the time of the fire published her account of what happened then, which was that Foley was refusing to let the train depart because all these people were shoved into boxcars, and there was a railway requirement that people were not allowed to ride in boxcars. You had to have a seat, and you had to pay for a ticket. And for people to ride in boxcars, you had to have special dispensation from higher headquarters to authorize the train to depart. And special dispensation had not arrived, probably because all the telegraph lines were down, because all the telegraph poles had burned. And so Foley was not letting the train depart. And this woman, her name is Catherine Gray. Her statement 50 years later was that she witnessed the one of the town elders talking to the chief of police about the situation, and the chief of police just saying, "Okay," climbing up into the cab where the train's engineer was and pointing a gun at his head and saying, "Start the train, get the train rolling." And then Lawrence Fowley, who was not the engineer, Lawrence Fowley, seeing that there was no more way for him to stop things, hopping up onto the cowcatcher and guiding the train out. You know, was Fowley a hero? Was he a villain? Am I unfairly maligning the name of a name of the dead? I do not know. That this is one person's recollection. She maintained that lots of other people witnessed this, but that there was an organized cover-up. That the town fathers said, "You know what? We need a hero, right? We're rebuilding Cloquet. We need a hero. We need an inspirational story that we can rally the town around during the process of rebuilding. Lawrence Fowley is going to be our designated hero, and we're never going to talk about this again." That is what she has maintained. Of course, by the time she put her recollection out, all those people were dead.
Right.
And so, giant question mark, but an incredibly gameable moment. So,
Before we get to game of
yeah.
moments, I know you'll probably want to talk about the Ojibwa in the area as well.
Yeah, so the Ojibwe story during the Cloquet Moose Lake fire has some interesting distinctions from the white settler experience, um, which is that, of course, the Fond du Lac Reservation was absolutely in the burned over area. Yet, even though 450 people died in the fire, not a single member of the Fond du Lac Nation died in the fire. And a lot of some of that surely is chance, but a lot of that is almost certainly due to the fact that Ojibwe folkways about how to survive a forest fire weren't like generalized, this in general is how you handle it, with, loads and loads of the folks, of the settlers in the area were Scandinavian, were Nordic. And, they, I'm sure, had their own folkways about dealing with forest fires, but those were for a different forest a continent away. And, Ojibways had been living on this land for centuries, and their folkways were very specific about this is how we deal with it on this land. And so what you had was, again, nobody died, which
I mean,
is
that's pretty good success.
yeah, pretty great success. And so you had folks getting their whole families into boats and paddling the boat out into the middle of the lake, knowing, this is how we handle it here. This is what works. And when there were no more boats left, you had families wade into the lake with blankets. And then you soak the blanket in the lake. You put the blanket around your family members, and as the blankets dry, because they're being steamed by the heat of the forest fire on shore, as the blankets are drying out, you're dunking more blankets and you're replacing, and so you've got this constant rotation of the blankets where as they're drying, you're soaking new ones and replacing them, and it worked. And there's some really remarkable stories out of the Fond du Lac response to the fire. But yeah, certainly the success is extraordinary and noteworthy.
Yeah. So all of these scenes, all of this is sort of similar to the first kind of thing we talked about, where there's a lot happening, a lot going on. So, and all of it is you just put it all in. Like, what is your best advice for putting all of this into a gaming context?
So I believe I've spoken about this in the past on this show. I am a big fan of adventure by way of complication,
Mhm.
where the party has a reasonably straightforward goal. And unfortunately, when you go out to accomplish this pretty straightforward goal, you find that there is something going on that makes things complicated, that makes things very difficult. And so this wildfire is a fabulous example, right? Oh, we need the MacGuffin, we need the piece of information. It's over here in this, rural bit of the countryside where there's a lot of logging going on. Um, and um, and you show up and oh, it's pretty straightforward, and then the sky turns orange and everybody says, oh geez, we need to make it to the railway station, to the science fiction drop ship, we need to make it to the magic teleporter, we need to make it to the place where people are going to be able to evacuate through. Again, I think it's absolutely incredibly symmetrical to have the way out also be the thing that started the fire, but most settings don't have steam locomotives in them. So, um,
Well, but it's like because the rural, it's like sort of throwback almost, where it's like, I mean, this is happening in 1918. I mean, that's right in the heart of like, paranormal and 1920s investigator stuff.
no
Uh,
shortage of Cthulhu type games where there
right.
are lots and lots of.
But it's not happening in like the East Coast. It's happening further out where they do have steam being
Mhm.
used still.
um, so um, and then okay, so oh geez, we've got to get out. And then the way I would handle it is as you are going to the evacuation point, you encounter these human vignettes, right? Hey, there is a family that's all climbing into their root cellar. Do you run over and say, guys, there is an enormous risk associated with doing this and try to talk them out of it? Because that slows you down. Are you willing to take that risk? Are you willing to slow yourself down in order to help those people? When your escape route takes you past Dead Man's Curve and you see car after car after car going over the edge, do you take 10 minutes to stop and try to set up some sort of sign, you know, 100 yards back from the curve saying, slow down, terrible curve ahead, don't do this? Um, hey, here's a family whose car just went off. Do you take the time to pull them out of the wreckage? Here's a family in a wagon and the wagon is on fire. Do you take the time? And it's all about every time you delay, you are incurring risk, right? The fire is all around you. and you need to model that mechanically in some way that is appropriate for your particular system, right? But it's a push your luck mechanic, right? How much are you willing to help people while knowing that every time you do so, you are increasing the danger to you. And it's an opportunity for real role play moment where the players are demonstrating who their characters are in a crisis, right?
Mm,
How much are they willing to imperil themselves in order to help others? And even if the answer is zero, right? We are
yeah,
not willing to help anyone. That is an incredible role play moment, right? Like that
sure.
is a great opportunity for the players to show who these characters are. As people, and I love it. Now, there is a giant asterisk on this whole thing, which is um, if you do this, vignette after vignette after vignette after vignette, at some point your party is going to get bored. And so you as a GM, you need to be paying very close attention. Is your party's interest, is the interest of the people at your table, is it starting to flag? Because when you notice that interest is starting to flag, cut it off then. That is the last vignette. You don't wait until they are actually bored, because then you have
Mm.
to regain their interest, and that is its own kettle of fish. As soon as you notice that their excitement is starting to flag, cut it off. We have done all the vignettes we're going to do. You make it to the evacuation point. And then when you make it to the evacuation point, I love this bit with Lawrence Fowley, where, hey, there is a bureaucratic impediment to evacuation. What do you do about it? Right? That's on you. That's on you, players. And that's a great moment where the party can kind of throw their weight around and be the heroes. And does the party participate in a cover up after the fact? Fun question. Um, and yeah, that is how I would use it. I would use it as a complication for a pretty straightforward problem that the party has set out to deal with, and give the players an opportunity to show who their characters are in a crisis.
I love it.
So before we end, there's kind of two other details. One of them are a really good plot hook that I would like to mention.
Yeah.
Um, so Cloquet and Moose Lake burned to the ground, right? And all of the surrounding farmland, all these homesteads burned to the ground. And so after the fire, it's time to rebuild. It's October in Minnesota. I don't know if you know this, but Minnesota gets pretty cold in the winter.
Oh, right.
So
You set this up with the flu. You said the flu was
yeah.
on. Okay. Yeah.
So there's this rapid people first are moved into, um, Masonic halls and churches, and used as makeshift refugee centers, schools, and then shacks are rapidly thrown up, back in as kind of step one of rebuilding Cloquet and Moose Lake and these homesteads. There's shacks going up, and these shacks
They
prove to
got
be
wood. Well, I guess it all burned though. Certainly some of the boards survived.
these shacks prove to be the perfect breeding ground for the Spanish flu, which arrives basically simultaneously. Spanish flu, depending on what metrics you use, is arguably the deadliest epidemic in human history. And so, yeah, that's super duper bad. Um, and actually, the folks may be familiar with the jingle dress and the jingle dance, which are kind of popular pan native phenomena here in the United States. The jingle dress and its accompanying jingle dance are Ojibwe responses to this specific epidemic.
Hmm.
That It starts off as, "Hey, I'm gonna sew this dress with all these jingly bells into it." For a sick child, and then there's a dance that goes with it, and it's a way to care for the sick in an epidemic where there is comparatively little that can be done for the sick. And there's a couple of Ojibwe nations that claim the origin of the jingle dress. I believe one of them is Fond du Lac. But it is unquestionably an Ojibwe response to the 1918 flu epidemic, and from there makes its way out into kind of a broader pan native phenomenon that is still very much going today. The jingle dances is absolutely a thing in 2025. Um, the adventure hook detail in the aftermath of the fire is, hey, remember World War One's going on,
Yeah.
and World War One, the American public is just paranoid as all heck. There's We today tend to remember World War One as just kind of a tragedy, right? Like there's very little rah rah about World War One today. But let me tell you, at the time, we as Americans, we were rah rah for World War One. We really felt that this was a struggle of good against evil, and everything bad that is going on is being blamed on the German enemy, which is particularly troubling in Minnesota, where the largest ethnic group in Minnesota then and now is German. Um, and there was already this thing on the East Coast, which had had the flu for a while. There's already this thing that like the flu is definitely Germany's fault. Like the Kaiser gave us the flu. He sent U-boats across the Atlantic to drop off flu germs on the East Coast. Definitely his fault. Um, and then folks in Minnesota start blaming the fire on Germany and Germans specifically, and so it's kind of whipped into this anti-German hysteria of, Germans started the fire, they did it because they hate America, they did it because they hate our freedom. That I think is as a bit of like conspiratorial thinking, very gameable. Like you see this going on, you see a particular ethnic group is being blamed for this fire. Do you, as the party, feel like you should involve yourself? Do you feel like you should step in? What do you do about that?
Right.
And then also, it's just like a useful reminder, I think, from a humility perspective, that when passions are high in the midst of a national tragedy, um, it is very easy to engage in conspiratorial thinking that 100 years later looks frankly absurd.
I mean, we talked a lot in the first segment about like how history it doesn't it's always it's so familiar
Hmm.
the more you look at it. So again, we could name many examples of that kind of thing in a much more modern era of creating enemies to point the finger at, to blame for things that have happened, finding enemies if you or creating them if you can't find them.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
So
Well,
yeah, that's how I would use the cloquet moose lake fire
well,
at the table.
yeah, did you get the bureaucracy? I don't know. I mean, we've covered everything so quickly. Obviously there's a little bit more detail in the blog post, but we should probably wrap up and we can send people to the blog post to get more, or they can join your Patreon and ask you questions there. And if they wanted to do all that, where would they find you and your books and stuff?
So you can find me at moltensulfur.com, or I just recommend Googling Molten Sulfur. It'll take you there. I'm on BlueSky at Molten Sulfur. I um, Yeah, I'm on Mastodon. I'm Molten Sulfur at Dice.camp. And you can find more about this at moltensulfur.com. You can find my Patreon, where you can throw a few bucks my way. I have a thing where, obviously you can pay a few bucks a month, or if you just want to throw a few bucks my way as a one-time thing, I have now opened that up as a possibility. Which, by the by, creators out there, strongly recommend that you do if you have a Patreon. Like, total tangent on a tangent. Patreon now makes it easy to do this. You can sell individual blog posts. So all I've done is just like, yeah, here's a pinned post at the top of the Patreon that you can pay $5 in order to see. And the post is just like pictures of my cat. So it's just like, thank you for $5. Here's what my cat looks like.
It's
Um,
but it's not like a bait and switch. It's like this
no,
is
no,
what
no,
this
no,
is
no, no.
for.
God, no, no. It's very explicitly flagged. It's like, this is the tip jar. If you just want to put a few bucks in the tip jar, buy pictures of my cat.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can find that there, and then also um, you can buy my books. Shanty Hunters is my award-winning RPG about singing and fighting magical sea shanties. Yeah, I've got a couple other RPGs out. Um, Coming probably next year is going to be Ballad Hunters from Pelgrane Press, which is about singing and fighting magical folk ballads in 1813 England and Scotland. And that's going to be super duper duper cool. And
For
also
real.
for real. And also for my day job, I write for a game line called Nations and Cannons, which is a 5e compatible RPG set during the American Revolutionary War. So if that rings your chimes, you can check that out at, I believe, nationsandcannons.com, or, just Google Nations and Cannons RPG. So anyway, I feel like I've plugged about 1,000 things.
Yeah,
Those are all the
you've
things.
got a lot of things to plug. Thank you for again for plugging for talking through all of the details of these two stories, for your work on the blog in general and your ideas about running games. I think you run a lot more games than I do, so like you're a much more experienced game master, and your insights into how that works is always refreshing and encouraging to listen to, because it's like, oh, that's how it happens. Great. I'll have to try to pay attention to that next time. Because I think you spend more time at the table than I do. So uh anyway, thanks. Thanks for Tristan. Thanks for being on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a blast. I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, well, we'll have you on in a couple months, when you've got some more posts out and some other news to share. And in the meantime, thanks. Take care of yourself, and thank everybody who watched this video for watching.